Today's subject is called Independent Voices of the New Typography. Essentially, we're talking about a group of designers who aren't a group. These are individuals, each of whom responded to 20th century modernism and then went off in their own direction and were very inventive in their explorations. Basically, any kind of visual communications can be factored into two prominent components. One is form and one is communication. This poses one of the most interesting and challenging philosophic dilemmas for any individual involved in visual communications. Some of the people we're looking at today had a definite tilt toward form. This doesn't mean that they weren't also communicators. We can contrast this attitude, for example, to the World War I posters we looked at, in which the intense propaganda needs were such that the message and the motivation of an audience through the response of this message sometimes could overshadow formal considerations. Had an interesting telephone conversation with the principal of a very prominent design studio the other day. He was calling to ask if we could recommend any young designers. He said that he had looked at over 24 applicants for this job there in the city where his studio is located, and he had rejected all of them. And I said, why? What was wrong? And he said, well, they were okay, but about half of them weren't communicators. They were just basic designers, people who really could move around type and squares and so forth, but were totally oblivious to any kind of message. On the other hand, many of the other people were quite capable, a lot with advertising backgrounds, and their work was effective communication, but it was just ugly. So I think he was posing this dilemma rather well in terms of the need to synthesize problems of form, problems of visual imagery, with the needs of communicating a message. The first person we're talking about today is a Dutchman, Piet Swart. Swart had very close contacts with the De Stijl group of Dutch designers. This is his personal logo. Zwart in the Dutch language means black. So really, he was Peter Black, translated into English. His initial P and then a black square to stand for his last name, Zwart, or Black, was used as his personal logo. We face once again the problem of professionalism versus amateurism. Marshall McLuhan observed that some of the major breakthroughs in all areas of human disciplines were made by amateurs, people who didn't know what they were supposed to think and didn't know what the rules were. The invention of rubber is a good example, where an accident led to a major technological breakthrough. Piet Swart was not trained as a typographer or graphic designer. He was trained as an interior designer, an architect, a person who involved himself in decorative design. Most of this work by Piet Swart that we're looking at now, some designs for fabrics, wallpapers, and cushions, were done around 1917, not too far from where Theo van Doesburg and Piet Mondrian and their friends were involved in inventing the De Stijl movement with this elementary vocabulary. Here we see Swart has a great deal of Art Nouveau in his work. There's also perhaps a bit of influence from the Austrian secession movement, perhaps a knowledge of Charles Rennie Mackintosh, Frank Lloyd Wright, an approach to decorative design that's curvilinear and organic. Also, some of the pieces, such as the one in the upper left-hand corner, has a strong geometric quality. Swart was very impressed by the De Stijl movement, and it radically influenced his art. Here's a chair designed by Piet Swart. We see that the ornament is gone, or at least the ornament ceases to be organic and floral and becomes geometric. He's designing a real straightforward functional geometric chair, the nice cushion. These stripes connect the cushion to the chair. They are bands of heavier fabric that go around and fasten onto the chair, which I thought was an interesting quality. We see the primary color plus neutrals, black, white, and gray, in his work. Swart, however, was not fully willing to accept the dogma of the style. He said, yes, we have a new language of form. These elementary shapes are dynamic and lively and express the 20th century, but I'm not willing to go all the way. Green happens to be a very nice color also. Diagonals happen to be very good lines, and I'm going to use them in my work. His first typographic assignments almost came by accident. Someone asked him to design some graphics for him, and he did a rough and ordered some type and put it together at his drawing board there at the architectural firm where he worked. Became very much involved in graphic design. One of his early clients was the Leica company that made Ioco rubber flooring. That IOCO that you see in the middle of this design was a brand name for a linoleum type flooring that they made. This early poster shows him when he was immersed in the de Stael movement. This lettering is geometric, but he wasn't able to give up his circles. Said, okay, Mondrian, horizontals and verticals are great and they bring order and structure to the world, but I'm going to put circles in my work too, and O happens to be a circle, and sometimes I might do it that way. Now, he never said these words. I'm telling you what I think he said from reading what he wrote later and interviews with him and so forth. Beautiful composition in this poster, the way the LAGA logo at the top balances the red material at the lower right, and then how the rubber flooring name of the product aligns with all the material, the horizontal lines of type in the two squares. It makes a very stable and dynamic composition. There's an element of play in Piet Swart's work. He immersed himself in the material of graphic communications. Here an IOCO logo is shown in three forms. Down at the bottom we see two versions, one using all geometric strokes, the other one using geometric strokes contrasted with circular O's. And in the top example, he just takes them apart and makes them flow freely across the page in a dynamic composition. A major client for Piet Swart, beginning in the mid-1920s, was the NKF Cable Works in Holland, the city of Delft. NKF was involved in making electrical cables, metal cables, heavy-duty cables, kind of things that power companies string all over every industrialized country. The logo that he designed for them, we see on the left here in this double-page spread. It was a big circle with three little circles inside. This gets to the essence of their products. Many of their cables had multiple electrical lines running through the cable, and then the heavy insulation that you have around high-voltage cables. Some of the cables were for use underwater or buried underground. So this idea of the electricity being protected was very important, or rather the cables carrying the electricity. So that logo made of four circles was designed by Swart and became a pretty significant design. Note on the right-hand page how he made this cross configuration and balanced the initials with the logo. That's asymmetrical balance really pushed, because around the axis of that horizontal and vertical, four black forms are placed. Three of them are virtually equal, these heavy black alphabetical characters. The other one pulls off to the right very dynamically and then the circle contains it. It's an interesting relationship between that circle, that logo, and the one on the left-hand side, a dynamic juxtaposition. In much of the printed matter for NKF, Swart put a black band down the left and right-hand side. He told them that this was to give you a place to hold the page so you wouldn't soil and fingerprint these catalogs and manuals and books that he designed for them. I suspect that they might have had that functional use, but probably he was most interested in those as dynamic compositional elements. Something he did in this double-page spread that's kind of interesting is the way he bracketed that center line where the two pages come together with these four white lines. This is a reproduction rather than the actual book, so you don't see that seam down the middle. But it was almost as though Swart was saying, physically, the material of this book is that there's this line down the middle, and I'm not going to try to hide it, I'm not going to ignore it, I'm just going to go ahead and emphasize it and make it part of the composition. A magnificent catalog and report that he did for NKF is shown here in the opening spread. We see the numeral 2 for page 2 and the numeral 3 moving up and down in the space. And by putting those page numbers not in the same position on the page, but in a dynamic relationship one to another, he's immediately setting up a field of tension, a kind of asymmetrical balancing to make this dynamic and lively. The yellow circle contains the date 1927-1928. Two wedges crisscross on the other page. The red one thrust up into the space toward the yellow circle, which makes a relationship. That line of type, the name of the company, moving off as a diagonal, is in counterpoint to that red wedge. The red wedge overlaps a blue wedge, which happens to be a halftone photograph. The portion of that photograph that the red overprints is the manufacturing facility for NKF. When red transparent ink overprints blue transparent ink, it makes purple, so that part of the photograph becomes a purple photograph on a red background. A very dynamic effect is taking place through the overprinting of the inks. Another spread from this catalog, this is pages 62 and 63. The black bars should bleed off the page. We're picking up from the cropping of the slide here a little extra white. Here he's dealing with the problem of composing photographs. Photographs normally come as 8.5 by 11 rectangles. I imagine at the Bauhaus, when they did the magazine, they were very happy to have the photographs rectangles because they could then compose with these rectangles. Swart, with this quality of dynamic composition that he was interested in, isolates a photograph of a manufacturing installation there on the left that's in deep perspective and makes it into a photographic wedge thrusting back into the space. He composes it against two photographs which are presented as strips of film. Becomes very kinetic. These diagonal slashes moving across the space are repeated photographs, and you can actually see the film strip on either side. To show the layers of a cable, he photographed it or had it photographed against black with cutaway to show the various levels of cable and insulation moving toward the central core. The typography and the other information is composed in counterpoint to this. So what we have at work essentially is a painter. Piet Swart was very much interested in the work of artists such as Mondrian, Picasso. He was knowledgeable of the Dadaists and the sense of chance in their work. And he approached the material of graphic design, combining the structure and order and repetition that he found in the de Stael movement with the kind of playful vitality that he found in the Dada work. Neither one was fully suitable, and he was synthesizing the two to make an original statement. Working with the principle of repetition. This is 2 pages from a little envelope-sized brochure for NKF. NKF cable is good, 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 NKF, Delph. Okay. Repetition and scale change functions here as it did in Dada work. The intent becomes very different. The Dadaists were interested in using these sound qualities through repetition and scale change in order to upset people, shock the middle class. Here, Piet Swart is promoting and publicizing these high-quality electrical cables, but using the same visual techniques. This has a real geometric structural quality. By contrast, this double-page spread from the same booklet uses diagonals. The left-hand page has diagonals that energize the space and move you from information to information. On the right-hand page, the diagonals are made up from lines of type, and also those 2 forms thrusting off the page on the right-hand side are H's, which function as H's in the words. In Holland or Dutch cable, we find the H becomes this huge form that's thrusting across the page. So the dynamic of scale change and typographic material. This is a little advertisement, what we might call a reminder ad. Designers often are asked by their clients to do rate holders, which are little tiny ads to get them a good rate. If you want to do a big ad and get some big advertisements and get a price for having an ad every 13 weeks, sort of a 3-month contract, you can do 3 big ads and then the other weeks do a little bitty ad, and you can get the rate for someone who is advertising every week. So this has a simple message. Roughly translated, it says Dutch industry or Holland industry should use Dutch cables or Holland cables. And the H in the first word Holland, which is light, forms a compositional rhythm with this bold H for the second word Holland, and then the K in this light cables and the L become long lines, and then the L's in the word Hollandisch becomes long lines. So with this simple message, now what the client gave Piet Swart was a piece of paper that had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5